The platform was swarming, faces blurred like a restless sea, voices clashing and echoing beneath the cavernous station roof. She stood near the edge, clutching the worn leather strap of her small suitcase, fingers white, knuckles trembling like brittle branches in a storm. The wind swept through the crowd, tangling loose strands of hair across her face, but she didn't brush them away. Instead, her eyes were fixed on something just beyond the sliding glass doors, something she refused to name. In her lap rested a faded red scarf, the edges frayed and soft, wrapped tight around the handle of the suitcase. It wasn't much, but it was hers, a quiet witness to every secret she carried. The scarf had a scent of distant rain and forgotten promises, and for a moment it seemed to pulse with the weight of things unsaid. Her gaze flicked upward, scanning the faces in the crowd, but no one looked back. The fingers of her other hand shook as she traced the cracked surface of a small silver watch on her wrist. Time had slowed, stretched thin like a whisper, and the second hand ticked unevenly, dragging behind the moments that mattered most. She could feel the ache of 1,000 tiny betrayals swirling beneath her skin, each one sharper than the last. She remembered the way her father's hands had trembled the day she found out. Not with fear, but something colder, like regret folding itself into every line of his worn skin. And her mother's silence, thick and heavy, pressing down on the kitchen table where the news landed like a stone. But here, in this moment, surrounded by the pulse of the city and the roar of trains, she was alone with her thoughts, watching, waiting. The red scarf caught a stray breeze, fluttering like a heartbeat, and she tightened her grip, as if holding onto it could keep the past from slipping away. A distant voice cracked over the station loudspeaker, announcing a delayed departure. Her breath hitched. She swallowed hard, eyes locked on the crowd once more, as if searching for a trace of what had vanished, something small and loyal and irreplaceable. Sometimes silence screamed louder than words. Sometimes the waiting was the hardest part. And as the wind tugged at her scarf again, she wondered if this moment would break or hold her. Her lips moved, barely audible. "I'll make them see." But no one heard. Not yet. The red scarf tightened around her suitcase handle, its softness like a faint tether to a past she couldn't quite hold. She blinked against the glare of the station lights, and suddenly, a voice echoed in her mind, her father's, calm but distant, the day he said, "We had to make choices, tough ones. It's for your future." His words lingered, cold and heavy, like shadows stretching over a childhood memory. She saw herself then, small and hopeful, dragging a similar suitcase down an old cracked sidewalk, her mother's hand warm on her shoulder. Back then, that bag had carried her dreams, drawings, books, the promise of something better. Now, this battered leather case felt like a relic of all the doors that had slammed shut since. Around her, the station pulsed with life. Families reunited in embraces that made her chest ache. A child's laughter pealed through the noise, bright and careless, while she remained a ghost in the crowd, her eyes tracing the smiles she would never claim. Her fingers brushed the scarf again, its red a stark contrast to the dull gray of the morning. It was more than fabric, it was defiance, a silent witness to her fight to reclaim what was taken. Financial struggles shadowed every step she took. The emergency fund her parents used, the one meant to be her safety net for college, was gone. Emptied without a word, just like the dog she loved, sold while she sat in class, unaware. The betrayal carved deep grooves into her trust. Alone, with no one to turn to, she carried the weight of proving herself not just to them, but to the world. A stranger stood nearby, watching her with quiet eyes. His gaze was steady, intentional, but he said nothing. The silence between them held a strange comfort, like he understood the words she couldn't say aloud. She glanced briefly at him, catching the flicker of recognition in his face, then looked away, retreating back into her private storm. The platform grew louder, the announcement echoing again, train delayed. Time stretched thin, the future uncertain. She took a breath, steadying herself, ready to face what came next. But then, hesitation stalled her steps. Her suitcase stayed planted on the concrete as a strange, soft smile crossed her lips, a mix of confusion and resolve. The scarf fluttered in the breeze one last time before she pulled it close. The goodbye was delayed, unspoken, hanging in the air like a question without an answer. She whispered to herself, almost a vow, "This isn't over." And the stranger simply nodded, as if to say, "Either is the fight." The first drops of rain fell like whispered warnings, soft and tentative against the glass walls of the station. She watched them trace lazy paths down the pane, blurring the faces beyond, as if the world itself was crying for what had been lost. The stranger's silhouette remained steady nearby, an anchor in the growing storm. She noticed his worn shoes first, scuffed leather cracked at the edges, soles uneven like he'd walked miles no one ever saw. When he shifted, a glimpse of something tucked from his jacket pocket caught the light, a small, faded photograph. He pressed it briefly against his chest before slipping it away, as if it carried a secret too heavy to share. Her gaze drifted back to herself in his eyes. There was a reflection there, a flicker of something she knew too well, loneliness wrapped in quiet desperation, the kind that gnaws at the edges of hope. She saw in him the invisible mirror of her own struggle, the weight of choices made in shadows, the cost of survival when love feels like a currency spent and lost. The air thickened with the scent of wet concrete and distant thunder rumbling low, a storm gathering both outside and inside her chest. She felt torn, part of her screamed to board the train, to escape this tangled web of pain and betrayal, while another part lingered, drawn inexplicably to the silent stranger who seemed to carry his own scars beneath the surface. Was this chance or design? The question hovered, unspoken, as she met his steady eyes. His silence felt intentional, like a challenge or an invitation. The truth was a knot she couldn't unravel. Was he a beacon or a trap? A fellow wanderer or someone who might pull her deeper into the dark? Her fingers tightened around the red scarf, the fabric soaked now, clinging to her suitcase like a lifeline. Every heartbeat echoed the storm's rhythm, the thunder matching the pulse of doubt and longing tangled within her. The rain fell harder, pattering like a countdown, blurring the lines between safety and risk. The platform emptied slowly, footsteps fading, voices retreating into the gray haze. She hesitated, the suitcase still rooted at her feet, caught between moving forward and the magnetic pull of the stranger's quiet presence. No words passed between them, only the weight of what might be, the fragility of trust hanging on a thread soaked in rain. She whispered into the storm, "What now?" And the stranger's eyes held hers, unreadable and deep, as if waiting for her to decide. The train remained silent, the future suspended in a breathless pause. The storm raged on. The rain had soaked through her coat, chilling her to the bone. Her breath came in sharp, uneven bursts as she stepped away from the platform's edge, the weight of the red scarf heavy in her hand. Her legs wanted to run, to leave this place, this storm, this tangled knot of silence and shadow. But something, some fragile thread, pulled her back. She stopped, heart hammering, and glanced once more at the stranger. He was there, unmoving, his eyes tracing the worn edges of the scarf, as if it held all the answers. Then, in a movement so slight it could have been a trick of the wind, he reached out and touched it, fingertips barely grazing the fabric. The scarf was no longer just hers. It was a fragile bridge between their stories, woven with pain, loss, and quiet defiance. Some people carry more than just bags, she whispered to herself, voice soft enough to be swallowed by the rain. They carry silence. Around them, the world kept spinning, but the looks from the scattered onlookers cut sharper than the cold. A mother's glance lingered too long, a couple's whispered words floated on the damp air, judgments veiled beneath polite distance. They saw a girl holding on too tightly to a ragged scarf, and a stranger who wore secrets like armor. The unspoken verdict was heavy, brokenness dressed as bravery. Her fingers trembled as she wrapped the scarf tighter, the fabric now a symbol not just of loss, but of resilience. The scarf had witnessed her betrayal, the dogs sold, the emergency funds stolen, silent cries in the night. But here, under the storm's relentless pulse, it also carried a fragile hope, a shared weight between two souls caught in the same relentless tide. The stranger's eyes met hers again, and for a moment, the noise of the station, the rain, the judgment, all faded. His gaze was not pity, nor was it threat. It was a mirror reflecting the storm inside her, a tempest of anger, sorrow, and the desperate flicker of something like trust. She was about to turn away, to escape the storm that wasn't just outside but inside her. But the scarf slipped from her grip and fluttered into his hands. Time held its breath. His fingers curled around the red fabric, steadying it, as if accepting a challenge she hadn't voiced. Her voice cracked, almost breaking. "This isn't just a scarf." He didn't speak. Instead, he nodded, a quiet acknowledgement that some battles were fought in silence, some scars hidden beneath layers no one dared to touch. The rain eased, but the tension hung thick between them, unresolved. She wanted to ask if this was beginning or the end, but the question stayed buried beneath the storm. And so they stood, two strangers bound by unspoken pain, letting the silence speak. The stranger's grip on the red scarf was firmer now, but his eyes held a sorrow deeper than she'd imagined. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost reluctant. "This belonged to my daughter. She passed away last year." Her breath caught. The scarf, her symbol of loss, was more than hers alone. It carried a grief she hadn't known, a connection threading their stories tighter than either dared admit. She blinked, the rain outside now a faint patter, fading into the background of her swirling thoughts. Memories flooded back, her father's voice steady but cold. "We had to make choices, tough ones. It's for your future." She swallowed hard, realizing the echo wasn't just in her mind. It was a loop, pain cycling between them, binding them in ways she never saw coming. Then came the twist, sharp and unexpected. The stranger slid a card across the damp pavement. "I'm the CEO of the company you applied to last week." Her heart lurched, the ground shifting beneath her. The company she'd pinned her hopes on, the one that represented a fresh start, was now tethered to this man, this enigma holding her past in his hands. Her grip tightened on the suitcase, the scarf's red thread seeming to pulse with new weight, as if every fiber whispered stories of loss, chance, and fate. She was caught between worlds, the familiar pain of betrayal and a future suddenly tangled with someone she barely understood. For a moment, the station was silent except for her ragged breathing and the distant echo of a phrase she had barely noticed before, now ringing with meaning. "Some people carry more than just bags, they carry silence." It wasn't just a line, it was a shared truth, a hidden confession between two broken souls. Her chest tightened, a fierce storm of emotions crashing inside. Anger, confusion, hope, fear. She realized she had passed a line of no return. There was no walking away from this tangled truth, not without losing a part of herself she could never reclaim. With a trembling hand, she nodded slowly, the fragile scarf slipping back into his palm like a silent pact. Without another word, she followed him through the station's sliding doors, leaving behind the rain and the judgmental eyes. Each step was heavier than the last, but resolute. The suitcase that once carried only her dreams now carried the weight of a new path, one that would change everything. As the door closed behind her, she glanced back once, eyes searching the fading platform, before stepping into a room where the future waited, uncertain and raw. No turning back now. The room was stark, bathed in pale fluorescent light that cast long shadows on the walls. The air was thick with unsaid words and brittle memories. She stood there, suitcase at her side, the red scarf now folded neatly in her hands, no longer a symbol of loss alone, but of the fragile thread connecting their fractured lives. He looked at her, eyes steady but heavy with a truth she hadn't expected. I didn't choose you because of who you are, he said quietly, but because you remind me of her. My daughter. The one who wore this scarf. Her throat tightened. Not love. Not fate. A mirror of pain and absence. The red scarf slipped from her fingers like a falling leaf, landing softly on the table between them. She watched as he picked it up, tracing the worn edges with a gentleness that shattered something inside her. It was a surrender, a handing over of grief, a letting go. I wanted to believe that helping you was a way to fix what I lost, he confessed, voice cracking. But maybe it was just my way of holding on. She swallowed the lump rising in her chest, the storm inside her quieting into a strange calm. For so long, the scarf had bound her to betrayal, her parents selling the dog, emptying her emergency fund, but now it was a bridge between two souls bearing different but equally heavy scars. She stepped forward, the suitcase's weight suddenly lighter. I'm not her, she said softly. But maybe we don't have to be the same to find something new. He nodded, a flicker of something like hope crossing his face, before he quietly handed the scarf back to her. Keep it, he said. Not as a burden, but as a reminder. She folded the scarf around the handle of her suitcase again, but this time, the fabric felt different, woven with forgiveness, resilience, and the promise of rebirth. Outside, the storm had passed. The platform was empty now, the crowd gone. But in her mind, the echoes remained, of the train station's chaotic pulse, the rain's soft lament, the quiet gaze of a stranger who wasn't a stranger anymore. She looked up, imagining that crowded platform from before, but now, she was the one waiting, for herself, for the future she'd claim on her own terms. No longer the girl betrayed, but the woman who chose to carry her own silence, her own story. As she turned away, suitcase in hand, the last light caught the red scarf, glowing like a small, defiant flame against the dusk. And in that moment she whispered to the empty air, a haunting truth lingering behind the words. Not every stranger you help is meant to stay, but some leave you changed forever. She walked slowly down the quiet street, the early evening light soft against her face. The city's noise faded behind her like a distant echo, replaced by the gentle rhythm of her footsteps. Her suitcase rolled steadily beside her, the red scarf folded carefully inside a small pouch in her bag, now a secret treasure, a quiet relic of the storm she had weathered. The scarf wasn't a symbol of loss anymore. It had become something else, a token of survival, of memories tangled with pain but also with unexpected grace. She thought of the stranger who had held it with such reverence, the man who carried his own silence like armor. They had both been broken, but somehow, that breaking had shaped them, sharpened their edges, made them more real. Sometimes, she whispered to herself, sometimes love is not romance, it's recognition. Not the kind that sparkles in movies or bursts in grand gestures, but the kind that sees the fractures beneath the surface and still chooses to hold on. Her fingers brushed the pouch, feeling the soft fabric beneath her palm. The scarf now rested quietly in the drawer of her small apartment, folded under the gentle glow of a lamp, a light that seemed to promise more than just warmth. It was a light of quiet strength, of things kept safe and sacred. She paused by the window, looking out at the city stretching wide and restless. The future was still uncertain, shadows of doubt mingling with the fragile hope she carried. There were no easy answers, no clear paths laid out. Just the unfolding moments, each one a thread woven into the tapestry of her life. Her breath came soft and steady, a small smile touching her lips, not from relief, but from acceptance. The scars and silence, the losses and unexpected connections, they were part of her story now, and she was learning how to live with them, to carry them without breaking. The night deepened, stars hidden behind clouds, yet she felt something like peace settle around her. The red scarf rested in its quiet place, a reminder that some stories don't end, they simply change shape, leaving space for the heart to fill. And as she turned away from the window, a single thought lingered, fragile and vast. Perhaps the hardest journeys are those where we learn to be strangers to ourselves, before we can truly be found.